So hello everyone and welcome to our webinar about Show Me the Money, how to slash total cost of ownership in the digital economy. I'm very proud and happy to have Eric Whitley with me. Eric is our head of product management, and I just forgot to introduce myself. My name is Yael Shatsky. I'm head of product and solutions marketing for Amdocs Optima, and thank you for joining us. We're actually going to dive right in. And we're gonna dive in right in asking basically going with the questions that we wanted to discuss today. And I think the first question that I have probably is around, we've named this webinar slashing total cost of ownership. But I think that in today's environment, the service providers have another challenge on their hands. One of them would be, to slash total cost of ownership, and the other one would be to actually grow their business. And I was wondering, Eric, if you could comment if you think that we're actually tackling the right issue, the right problem, or do you think that maybe we should have been concentrating on growing business?
Sure. No, happy to answer that. So, one of the things we've been seeing, we've been coming out with new releases of our solution now for quite some time, and every release we try to make sure that we add some functionality that was driven by one of our customers, and that's usually where we see a lot of the add or help grow revenue aspect of things. So that's new rating functions, billing functions, discounting functions, new ways of packaging things together. And it's great for those customers that are in a market where they can take advantage of that. That's a great way to use the solution to help grow revenue. But I think we all know that companies and operators they have a set of products, and it's not usually the IT department or the billing department that's driving new revenue raising strategies. And whether that's right or wrong, we can certainly see that it's a lot easier for companies to introduce cost savings than to have the IT department or the billing department originate revenue generating ideas. You need both. There's no question that both are equal, but in terms of the ability to implement it, you don't need the buy-in of the marketing department to start saving money on how you run things. So that's so with that in mind, we've been doing a lot of things in terms of speeding up our processes, making them easier to run, introducing automation, as well as some technical features like a multi-threading that enables things to run faster and take better advantage of the hardware. So we see both as equally important, but one can be more easily implemented by the folks that deploy and operate our solutions.
Basically, you're saying that the service providers have a little bit more control on the expense side rather than on the growth side, right? If I have to simplify it.
Well, they go in opposite directions, right? Theoretically, revenues can grow infinitely, whereas costs can only reduce down to zero. So you certainly have more potential in terms of your revenue side, but you have more control over your cost side. You cannot create software that guarantees the generation of additional revenue, but you can certainly generate software that strongly enables the reduction of cost.
So, but if we're talking about that side of the house and that aspect, where do you see the big buckets of cost reduction? Where do you think the most significant reduction can take place or can come from?
Sure. Well, and I hate answers that boil down to it depends, but the real answer, of course, is it depends. Since we have operators that work in all regions of the world across multiple lines of business, it can vary. So for most of our operators in the Western Hemisphere or in North America and EMEA, the cost of personnel is an extremely significant part of their infrastructure, generally second only to network operations. with facilities a distant third. So, and that equation flips upside down in some of our developing countries. So we need to make sure that we have the ability to run the solution more efficiently, with fewer people and on fewer pieces of hardware. We also need to make sure that we utilize fewer third-party licenses. For example, the operating system, the Oracle licenses, the WebLogic licenses, Tuxedo licenses, these all add up over time. So we focused on efficiency of the operation, automation as much as we can, and then we've been on a long-term journey to engineer out the most costly of those third-party licenses so that you don't get hit with the overhead of operating multiple pieces of software that you have to pay for.
Okay, so I actually want to ask the audience this question as well. I want to make sure that you get a chance to say what you think about this, and I actually want we're going to share a small poll, and what we're asking is basically, what do you think about reducing costs of the digital and BSS platform? Where would you focus on? Reducing hardware, reducing third-party licensing, okay, or develop self-service apps or automated processes? I'm going to give you a few seconds to answer. In the meantime, I can tell you that we've shared this poll also on Twitter, and with almost 300 respondees, and with a very great majority, well, not so great. Well, the majority people answered that it was around automating processes, and about 30%, and 29% answered that it's around reducing third-party licensing. So as you can see, or can they see this? Okay, good. So as you can see, this actually is split. The answers here are split between the automated processes and the reduced third-party licensing, which again is around the same themes that we saw before. Okay, so we did the poll already. So moving on. I think, Eric, you travel a lot and you see customers from around the world. So it's not, your view is not actually centered or focused only on the Western Hemisphere, as you've mentioned before. But so based on your experience, out of all of the operational expenditure, how much do you estimate is the spent to be on ongoing third-party licensing?
You know, this tends to be one of the hardest things to figure out because often costs of enterprise licenses or licenses such as Oracle or the operating systems, they tend to be negotiated separately from the individual applications and often at a corporate level or even at a group level. So getting clear insight into what an individual operator pays for these is often sensitive. And often the people we work with don't actually know themselves. So we take as a rule of thumb that when we do a deployment, typically the cost for the application is no more than a third to a quarter of the overall cost of the solution. With the database and the operating systems and the application servers often consisting of 2 to 3 times what we're able to get in license cost for a given deployment. And given what we know about list prices, typical discounts, and typical maintenance rates, it's not unreasonable to assume that the annual support costs for the database and the operating system typically runs 2 to 3 times the annual expenditure associated with the billing system. So there's significant money associated with these items that tend to not be line items on any annual operating budget, or at least ones that show up directly associated with the application. So Again, really hard to get good intel around that or good metrics. No one seems to have great knowledge. So one of the things we sort of extrapolate from the presentations, and as you said, I've certainly taken this show on the road to a number of customers. This idea of removing the dependency on Oracle, of removing the dependency on Tuxedo and WebLogic, and the older operating systems like Solaris and HPUX. This has people leaning forward, and we've certainly seen a lot of companies that have been able to create business cases entirely around the cost reduction and the efficiencies that they gain by modernizing their infrastructure. And so we're happy to help out with that, right? This is a great driver of upgrades, which are result in additional functionality for all of our operators, in addition to reducing their costs.
But you have to use some type of software, right? So I assume, instead of licensed software, I assume that I'm assuming this is where open source technology actually comes in. And but open source software, which is again a big part of our platform, of Amdocs Optima platform, yet it does carry its inherent risks, such as the instability or it's no one's child and nobody's responsible for it type of feeling. How can you verify and how do you instill trust with our customers that the heart of their operations, the billing system, the main system, is actually safe and stable and is good for them to operate and they can trust it?
Sure. Yeah, no, this is like many things, it's an evolution, and attitudes change, and attitudes change for a variety of reasons. 15 years or so ago, which when we did the very first ports of our solution to Linux, Everton essentially said there's no way operators will ever adopt that. Since then, a lot of things have happened. The Linux ecosystem and support environment has gotten a lot richer. A lot of companies have paved the way by deploying solutions based on open source technology for web services, financial services, insurance, retail, banking. I mean, there's really no industry that today hasn't been touched by some version of open source. But probably the biggest impact on this is the rise of the commercially supported open source. So certainly you are welcome to run CentOS or Ubuntu or any other Linux distribution, but what we find is that most operators choose to get some level of support and security patching and ongoing maintenance of their operating system from someone like Red Hat, for example. And while that takes the cost from zero to a few $1,000s a year, it's considerably less expensive than maintenance contracts for Sun equipment used to be, for example. So it's a way of trending towards lower support costs, if not actually reaching zero. So I think that's really it, is that the FUD factor of using open source software, it doesn't stick anymore. There's too many use cases of large successful enterprises running very large scale business on open source, and it's also part of a generational change in IT departments as well, I think.
Right. Okay. So let's move to another buzzword that we often hear. And we hear a lot about automation, right? We hear it's another way of reducing costs, but it's also effective in other places around the food chain, basically. So looking at automations, where would you implement them first? Where would you think that is the most appropriate, if you had to choose? Where's the most appropriate thing to start from, place to start from?
Sure. So you kind of hinted at this in your question, but automation is certainly not just about reducing cost, right? It is a chance to improve quality and predictability. And so, because with automation, you can obviously run far more tests and validations and checks on both code as well as configuration as well as environments in order to avoid frequently encountered issues that might have cropped up. So the thing about automation, it's not free, right? It does take time and effort to set up. So it is one of those things where you have to see where you're going to get the payback from it. It's not a question of just front end versus back end. If the environment is stable, it may not make a whole lot of sense to automate a whole lot of code deployment or development functions. On the other hand, if you have a rapidly evolving set of products or rates or offerings or interface code, an investment in automation up front is one of those places that can really pay off. We have done a lot of things with regards to automating and streamlining back-end processes. And so you get the return on your day-to-day data center operations, even if it's not the things that customers see. But you can certainly, I think we're going to touch later today on the concepts around self-care first, so I'll hold back on those comments until then.
How do you know that? Okay, guys, I want to ask you that question as well. What do you think? Where do you think that automation should be implemented first? We have 4 choices there around testing and QA, customer service, monitoring, or business flows. Please cast your vote now. Okay. No. Okay. So do we have the results? So 67% believe that automation should go into customer service first, which is an interesting choice, and I think it actually reflects the general view, I think, these days. But now, Eric, I want to talk about something that is a little bit more controversial, if you wish, and that is the cloud. You and I have had many discussions about it, and I think that a lot has been said about the migration into the cloud, basically putting your operations on the cloud. We also, within Amdocs, we also have the partnership with AWS that was announced a few months ago. But I think, again, from what I see in the market, I think that it's talked a lot about, but I see that there is a little bit, a little reluctance, or some type of, let's just put it that way. Companies are not moving to the cloud just yet, okay? And I wanted to ask, why do you think that is? And what do you think is actually preventing service providers from going into the cloud and basically enjoying from the capabilities that it offers them?
Sure. Well, I think the path upon which cloud adoption it mirrors in many senses the adoption of open source. In that, not a lot of people want to necessarily be first, and that for existing operators, there's a fair amount of, if you will, internal politics to overcome, right? There will be portions of your organization that have successfully run internal data centers for years, whose livelihood is directly threatened by a disruptive technology such as going to the cloud. So I will challenge you just a little bit on the idea that we're not seeing a lot of movement in the marketplace. Certainly, every single RFP that comes to us these days wants to understand our cloud strategy, wants to make sure that we are capable of running on both a public or a private cloud, and indicates that they'd be perfectly willing to adopt, a BSS and cloud infrastructure.
But I'm going to challenge you back in the middle of the sentence, and that is because we have been seeing that for quite some time. It's not the first time that we see it. It's not like the first year.
Sure, and there's a first mover problem, of course, but we now have customers who have their production environments on the AWS cloud. We're seeing a great deal of use of private cloud technology, and personally, I believe there's a tipping point coming. I think we're going to see something very similar to what we did with regards to the adoption of open source technologies, where companies generally did not want to be the first movers, but once the evidence around what operating complex backend systems on the cloud does for you becomes compelling, it's going to be hard to sustain the FUD, if you will. So, but I do want to pause for a second and say that the cloud is not necessarily a TCO argument. Cloud is generally a service, or really whether you get a public cloud or you get something like a platform as a service or infrastructure as a service. That is something that the cloud operator is running for you and operating and making money by operating. So it is not necessarily cheaper than running your own in-house systems, particularly if you have fully depreciated hardware and not a lot of change in your operating environment. Where cloud TCO really shines is if you have dynamic, spiky, or unpredictable behavior. So, for example, if you wanted to stand up some additional environments for testing or data migration in an in-house environment, you'd have to procure all of that hardware that would then effectively be underused after you finish your project. Or if you have highly spiky traffic coming into your system throughout the day. So, for example, you try to rate all of your records in a 1 hour period in the evening, or you have a busy hour in your call center. You can see that you have to purchase and procure. You have to procure the compute power in order to meet the highs of the spike, and then those are underused for the rest of the time. So, for fairly stable environments or for predictable environments, on-premise computing can be a better cost argument, but cloud certainly enables a lot of flexibility and elasticity.
Okay, let's move on to our last topic of this discussion, which is around the self-service first, right? Self-service first. What does it actually mean to you when you think? What do you think will be the impact of CSPs actually empowering customers on the front end of the self-service on all levels, basically self-service on all levels, and then basically empowering empowering their customers to do whatever they want or whatever they to the extent that the service providers are actually allowing them to do by themselves.
Sure, and so self-service first for us. Actually, it started with some market research that was completely unambiguous, right? And it boiled down to analyst after analyst, company after company, interview after interview. You find that customers have a greater set of satisfaction, a higher net promoter score for operators if they are able to solve their problems themselves rather than calling a CSR. Rather than having to spend time on a phone with someone, just perhaps waiting, perhaps getting the right person, perhaps not, perhaps getting routed around. Satisfaction goes up dramatically if you give the customer an option to solve their problems themselves. And this is not news, but what has happened in many cases is because the self-care system came after the implementation of a CRM, it ended up being reverse engineered and kind of a minimalistic proposition. What we've been able to do for the last couple of years is to treat self-service first as a paradigm when we develop the software. So we essentially say, let's try to enable as many functions as possible out to the end user. Then we can give the CSR a solution that is effectively self-service plus, and the retail channel is self-service plus, rather than CRM minus in terms of capabilities. That lets us develop the code once, roll it out in a consistent way, and really it is because we put that thinking about the self-care user at the beginning of the cycle rather than as an afterthought. It is really driving the ability to create a lot of simplified flows and strengthen the customer experience, regardless of which channel it gets delivered through. So, and that's not to mention, since we are in fact on a TCO call, and I guess I should cycle back to TCO. Obviously, the more your customers can help themselves, the fewer staff you need to have on call to resolve their problems. This is not to suggest that the right way to go is to a zero-touch, zero CSR operation, but certainly we believe that the ratio of consumers or customers to CSRs has been shifting and will continue to shift rapidly as customers solve more and more of their own problems, first via self-service and then by intelligent self-service and predictive care.
Right. So good. So I want to ask this again. I want to ask the audience this question: what are the key drivers in investing in self-service for you guys? What do you think is the most important aspect? Is it customer satisfaction? Is it lowering the call center costs? Is it empowering the CSRs, or empowering enterprise admin? I have to also share with you that we have asked this question also on our Twitter poll, and with exactly like in your case and the results here, 100%, and 62% of the respondents there said that customer satisfaction is the main driver for self-service first. And just to add on what Eric said before about the customer satisfaction and speaking to analysts, we actually had a research done with the CM Forum. And that has found that customers that enjoy, customers that go through a very an all digital, basically all self-service type of engagement with the system are 19% higher, give basically 19% higher satisfaction rate to their journeys. And this is I think a part of the important aspect of it needs to be considered when you're moving forward with implementing such capabilities. So, and I want to talk a little bit about the platform that actually offers everything that we've discussed here, and this is Amdocs Optima. Amdocs Optima is a digital customer management and commerce platform to rapidly and securely monetize any product or service. We are actually targeting our customers. Target customers are innovative communications contenders, which are in the smaller operators rather than targeting the big mega operators of the world. We're also servicing MVNOs and MVNEs and supporting any type of interest of the service provider to go and diversify in terms of onboarding additional tenants to its platform. We are also serving service providers that want to serve enterprises with the platform and supporting that type of engagement. And we are focusing also on small cable and pay TV operators. What is basically Amdocs Optima in a nutshell? Well, I think the claim to fame of Amdocs Optima is the fact that it's prepackaged and it's ready to go. So first and foremost, we're a robust, smart billing platform that enables swift integration. We can actually get you up and running in less than 6 months. That table-driven, simple configuration that doesn't require coding can also means that you can have very short time to market when offering new products, services, and bundles. We, of course, also support the digital ecosystem, the digital journeys, including the backend required to support such engagement, as well as commerce in various channels, with the self-service first as a paradigm when we design our UIs. We are also we believe that we are best value for money. I don't think that we will ever want to be the cheapest platform out there, but we definitely deliver the best value for your buck, including the reduction of cost of a reduction of a cost, as we've discussed today, manifested itself in making Oracle database is optional. Some customers, of course, they like their Oracle database, but we are making it optional. Also, we deliver our product in DevOps methodology, so you can see fast time to value. We've already talked about the multi-tenancy and the cloud, the fact that we can be implemented in the cloud or on-premise. But I think the most important aspect is the fact that we are future-ready and open. You don't really know what the future holds and what's going to happen, but if you wish to deploy one line of business and then later on another one, the system can actually support you from day one. And we have implemented into our business integration layer open standards, partner-friendly. JBoss, basically the business integration layer is built on JBoss open source technology with over 300 REST APIs that are user-friendly and partner-friendly and can be integrated easily with any third-party application. Let's take a quick look at the high-level architecture. So as you can see below are the customer and revenue management systems backend that bring all that richness of a rich set of BSS functionality. I don't think I've mentioned the fact that it's converged billing, it's both pre and post pay. And again, it can be implemented on-premise or in the cloud with multiple lines of supported and multiple lines of business. On top of that, we're offering business and integration layer that is built on a JBoss technology with exposing a REST API for swift and easy integration. And on top of that, we're offering a Amdocs Optima Digital X, which are the UIs and basically the digital engagement options in channel that we offer here before, and we talked about before. This is an omni-channel interaction, meaning you can start your journey on one channel and end it on another, starting from your, let's say, mobile phone, and then ending with a CSR or in a real retail store, if you wish. With all integrations that are happening, interactions are happening online, and everybody can see the same thing. The reason behind this webinar and actually having it now is the fact that we've launched Amdocs Optima 5.0, and we are offering with that additional capabilities. The one that I actually want to point you towards is the infuse of intelligence, the fact that we can now offer a specific flows and intelligence to go with our system, as well as the reduction in the total cost of ownership, which was this whole webinar was about. And with that, I want to basically open the platform for questions, if you wish. If you have any questions, we can answer them. Okay, so I see one question. As we see that open source adoption is increasing exponentially to reduce the third-party licensing, but this comes with significant architectural changes. How do you convince customers and internal stakeholders for that big shift? Eric, I think this question is for you.
You know, it's very hard to convince someone that doesn't have a champion in-house, right? And so what we are able to do is we're able to point to references and success stories from around our customer base. And so for those people on the line that know our product set, if you need good references for the adoption of Linux over Solaris or HPUX, if you need good references for surviving without Tuxedo or WebLogic, we can certainly provide those. Our upcoming release will replace or essentially make Oracle optional, and you will have the option of using Postgre instead of the Oracle RDBMS. And I obviously don't have a reference for that quite yet, but I will quite quickly after we announce it as GA. So references go a long way. Internal sponsors and support go a long way. We can certainly help with proofs of concept. And those of you who know our license model know that we will make available the later version of any of our products to customers that are under our maintenance agreements so that you can try them out in your own environments. So, and we also, I guess I would also say this, is that we have not ever done a hard cliff for any of our technology support. So when we introduced new operating systems, we maintained support of the existing ones for a period of time. And likewise, with the other technology choices, we give people an on-ramp onto the new technologies so that you're not forced to swallow deep and take onto yourself a technology that you don't internally trust yet. So, but as always, there's no proof like talking to someone that's already done it.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so guys, I want to thank you very much for joining this webinar. If you do have any questions, please go ahead and share them. I would love to speak with you, and we can set a personal demo that is basically tackling your specific questions and comments and requirements. And you can email me and also follow me on a LinkedIn and on Twitter. Again, I want to thank you very much for joining, and have a good day and good afternoon. Bye-bye.